If you were one of the unlucky people that decided to invest in Joker Year One from Chip Zdarsky, Giuseppe Camuncoli, with some story elements illustrated by Andrea Sorrentino recently, you came away from a bad story, but there was also some really perplexing art in there. In fact, when I reviewed the first issue, I was like, there's something wrong with Andrea Sorrentino's art here. He has a style that's very familiar. It's something that I personally like. He certainly uses a ton of photo reference, and you can see that he takes images that already exist and incorporates them into his art and all that kind of stuff. But he did it with his own style and flair and stuff, and I think it really worked. But there was an enormous departure in Joker Year One, specifically in the flash forward parts where they're 40 years in the future or whatever it is, and the world has become Joker zombies or something like that. And I remember saying, hey man, there's something really fucked up about this. It doesn't look like his art, and there's some weird things going on with it that it almost looked like perhaps Andrea Sorrentino had taken his art, maybe illustrated some stuff, and then run it through AI filters to change it and make it look a little bit different. That was my belief at the time of what had actually happened. But I'm not personally an artist. I do personally use Midjourney just a little bit for some elements of thumbnails here and there, but I don't have a lot of experience with it. So it wasn't something I could really talk on specifically and say, hey, this and this and this. Your eye can just tell that something is off about this. And I am not the only one that noticed something was a little bit afoul. I saw other people talking about it, but finally an artist actually went out there and started pointing out some of the weird things going on with Andrea Sorrentino's art. And not only do they believe AI was involved in it, they think it is AI art just in general, like it isn't enhanced by AI art, like it was created by AI, which would be a big problem for DC Comics. I do think a lot of people trust DC and Marvel. If you're going to put down your $5, your $6, up to $10 on a comic book these days, that you're actually getting art illustrated by an artist. And I do think this will end up being a black eye and probably will spark some more debate on the future of AI art within the comic book industry itself. I do think inevitably at some point DC and Marvel are going to figure out, once AI kind of really catches up and can do seamless art where you can't really see it so much, that it's going to be a lot cheaper to have comic books illustrated in the interiors by AI rather than real artists themselves. And I imagine they'll probably start out with covers first because that's a little bit easier of a thing to do, to sell it on covers, and you can generate a bunch of different variant covers. And we do know that Marvel and DC are obsessed and addicted to the variant covers. So I do think this is a inadvertent case study on how people are going to react to DC and Marvel Comics publishing AI interior art. In a twist that seems ripped from the pages of a comic book, DC Comics' latest Batman series has come under scrutiny, with accusations flying that the artwork might be a product of artificial intelligence. This controversy touches on broader debates within the creative industries about the role and recognition of AI-generated content and whether it can or should replace human creativity. The Batman series, a staple of DC Comics output, has long been celebrated for its rich storytelling and dynamic visual art, making these allegations particularly poignant for fans and creators alike. That is probably the craziest thing about this, is that if DC Comics did let it slip through, they actually let AI art into their published comic books, that they would actually let it in on the Batman series, their flagship comic book, because that's obviously going to stir up a lot of controversy. There are a lot of people, especially comic book pros, that absolutely hate the idea of AI art being published by DC and Marvel. We've seen a lot of AI artists or people that dabble in AI art. I don't know if you want to call someone that does prompts an artist, but people that have been big proponents of AI art get removed from conventions because a lot of the old school traditional artists do lose their minds, even though a lot of them are now using, at least digital enhancements and backgrounds and all that kind of stuff. We've certainly seen a lot of changes when it comes to how comic book art looks over the last 5-10 years. A lot of it, in my opinion, certainly for the worse. Specifically, coloring is awful nowadays. I wish they would go back to fucking markers because it looks so much better and more dynamic and more fun to see than what they're doing with colors these days. But a lot of times you will just see what are clearly like 3D elements placed in the background and shit like that. And this is obviously taking it to another step where you're just going in doing the prompts and you're pulling out the pictures to put into the comic book. There were a lot of inconsistencies within the art that Andrea Sorrentino was doing for the future. Moments where things looked really out of place. Like there's this visual of a Batman riding a horse with a speaker because he's playing the frequency. That was basically going to cure everybody from being zombie jokers or whatever. And the speaker looks so weird in comparison to everything else in the image with Batman on the horse, and it's very stylized. And it all looks like You know, it was created by the same AI artist, and then it looks like he like put a speaker in there. It was very, very strange. But we do have some more explicit details and examples of this. In a March 10th thread on X, formerly known as Twitter, James Leech noted numerous potential reasons why he believes that DC Comics may very well have utilized AI-generated artwork in the current Batman run, stating, "Now that I've read all the issues of Batman that Andrea Sorrentino contributed to, I feel like there's a pretty strong case that AI art is being used." Leech went on to note the usual telltale signs of AI-generated artwork in DC Comics' recent Batman 143, written by Chip Zdarsky and illustrated by Andrea Sorrentino and Giuseppe Camuncoli. These included strange anatomy errors a human is not likely to make, such as the Joker's weird hands and wandering nipples. I never thought I was going to get to make a video about wandering nipples, but now that I've done it once, I want to do it again. Yes, there were some weird stuff. Like you see on the one image, the one nipple's where it's supposed to be, and the other one's like in the rib cage. Certainly, you wouldn't expect a human to make that kind of mistake. The hands are disfigured, not in so much of a grotesque manner, but they're almost like webbed. Like the AI wasn't able to differentiate the digits themselves in some places. Like I said, my initial interpretation was that it was enhanced by AI, but there's a good chance, based on what James Leach is saying, that this was just created whole cloth from AI using prompts and stuff like that, which I do think would be very sad. It would be a sad day for DC Comics and certainly Batman. And even Andrea Sorrentino, an artist that I really, really appreciate and have respected his work over the years. This isn't something that a lot of people want to see in their comic book industry, certainly not the artist, but I don't think a lot of fans are interested in paying these kind of prices for AI-generated art. I want to see art by the most creative people in the world that have the best ideas and the best skills and all that stuff. I don't want to see art in the comic book that I'm paying for generated by prompts and people that know how to get the AI algorithm and everything to work correctly and spit out the image basically being what I want it to be. And there are a lot of inconsistencies in the art that Andrea Sorrentino uses within the issue itself. And I definitely, if you haven't seen this thread on X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it, from James Leach, I definitely recommend you go out there and check it for yourself, because he has a lot more stuff to talk about than just this. These are just the examples that were like the biggest standout there that really paint a picture that there's a very good chance that Andrea Sorrentino took some real shortcuts in illustrating this comic book for Batman 142, 143, 144. I think that's Joker Year One. Sorrentino helped illustrate all those issues. And like I said, from the very first issue, the art does look off. The allegations of AI-generated artwork in DC Comics' new Batman series highlight a pivotal moment in the intersection of technology and traditional art forms. As the debate unfolds, it serves as a litmus test for the future of creative expression, challenging the industry to redefine the boundaries between human and machine in the artistic landscape. The resolution of this controversy will not only affect the Batman series, but also set a tone for how the comic book industry and perhaps broader artistic community engages with AI technology. And as far as I know, the people that I've talked to, like the artists that I have talked to, none of them like AI art. They don't like the AI technology because it is essentially incapable of artistic expression. It's incapable of creating anything from scratch. It's basically going out there and borrowing aspects of other people's artwork and then kind of putting something together. So it does need to learn. The AI needs to learn for other artists that have been out there, like a Jim Lee or a Jack Kirby or Andrea Sorrentino or an Alex Ross and all these kind of things. And that's how it basically generates the art. It has been determined that it is not an infringement when it comes to like copyright, and you can't like trademark AI art and stuff like that. And it certainly does have its purposes, and it does have things that are very helpful to people. Like you can do some really cool character designs, or you can do concepts for what your character would like look like, things that you would like incorporated onto a character if you're using AI art for that. I use it sometimes, like there will be a character that I want to have an expression, and quite frankly, there just isn't a high resolution image out there of the Batman doing this or Spider-Man doing that, and you can use AI art to generate things like that. But I'm not selling my thumbnail as original art. I'm not actually charging anyone to go and look at my thumbnail. I think that's the biggest problem, is people have an expectation when it comes to DC Comics and Marvel Comics that we are getting original art from comic book artists and it's done by hand and all that kind of stuff. That's why a lot of people have a problem with Grade Land. That's why I have a big problem with Salvador LaRocca, because you can clearly say that he's not using photo reference a lot of times. He's clearly tracing a lot of stuff that he does nowadays. And it does feel like you're being ripped off, like you're not getting what you paid for. And I think these issues are only going to expand. And I do think DC Comics have not done this yet, but they do need to get out in front of this and say, what is their stance? What is their company's official stance on using AI generated art, interiors, on covers and all that kind of stuff? Are they loosey-goosey with it? Will they accept some AI generated art? Are they against it whole cloth? Marvel Comics probably need to do the same thing, because this is only going to get bigger and bigger. AI isn't going anywhere. It's only going to get more robust and easier to use and more accessible basically to everybody. And I do certainly hope that Marvel Comics and DC Comics commit to using real artists, to using people that have honed their craft over decades upon decades and become the best artists in the world, rather than going with the easy way and the shortcut and delivering AI generated art within their comic books. But people have already made full comic books that are illustrated by AI, and they've been up on Kickstarter and Indiegogo and stuff like that. And I understand there are people that do admire AI art, and they like the idea of what it can be, and a next generation of evolution of creativity. But it doesn't really do that yet. That's one of the reasons I'm not for it. And if you're going to charge that much money, I think that they should be delivering real handcrafted art within the comic books themselves. And I just hope they speak up to it now. And I don't think this controversy is going to go away. And we're probably going to see this stuff more and more. We know that DC Comics had already published an AI generated cover a few years ago, and it looks like it's probably finally creeped into the interiors as well. Definitely want to hear from you guys. What is your stance on AI art? Are you okay with DC or Marvel incorporating AI art into the interiors? Are you okay with Marvel and DC replacing all the interiors with AI art? Are you okay with Marvel and DC replacing the covers with AI art? If I get enough responses and people have enough great points, we can have the whole video up on it, and hopefully Marvel and DC see it, and we can get our point across, whether or not we do or do not want this, because I do think it's an issue that needs to be tackled. And if you would like to keep tackling the big issues within comic books and the nerd sphere and all that kind of stuff, you need to get over to the Thinking Critical Patreon. If you want to go and fight DC and Marvel Comics and demand better comic books, that's where it's at. We have great conversations about comic books and geek culture all week long, 8 hours of new podcasts every single week. That's 32 hours of new podcasts every single month. If you haven't checked it out, there's a link in the video description. Lots of fun to be had on the Patreon.